Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch the show and react to it. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. As I always say, everything I'm saying is total speculation based on very little information. When I make actual assessments of people, it takes weeks. So everything I'm saying is, completely speculative. I use this show as a jumping off point to educate about other ideas. So always keep that in mind. And let's get to the show.
Hazel dropped a bomb on me that she was bisexual.
Is there hot girls there? Like, kind of girls that I like?
Yeah.
So, okay, she is bisexual, but she's also saying, are there girls there that I will like? I'm guessing what they're talking about is polyamory, that they're not talking about bisexuality. So there's two possibilities. She's saying, I want to come there and meet someone else and dump you. I'm guessing that's not what she's saying because Tarik is not upset right now. And it sounds like they've had conversations like this before. I don't know if this is what's happening, but this is actually a big problem if they're identifying this as bisexuality. So let me break this down. I don't know where this is going to go. As I always say, I use this as a jumping off point. But so let's just use heterosexuality here for a second. So let's say that Hazel is heterosexual and she identifies heterosexual, and so they're like, okay, she's heterosexual. Well, we understand that if she is saying, I want to be with you and only you, then we understand she doesn't want to be with other men, right? So if you were gay, if she were a lesbian and she were to date a woman in the United States, we understand that if she's saying, I only want to be with you and I'm monogamous, then we understand that she doesn't want to be with other people. She just wants to be with her wife or her future wife, and she doesn't want to be with other women. Okay, we understand that, right? But somehow, when you say that someone is bisexual, there's this really, really stupid assumption that a lot of people make that, oh, you must mean that you can't live with just one person. It's this weird heuristic that people have, like, well, if you're into both genders, and never mind the fact that there's fluid people and queer people, but so what the heuristic that people will make is they will say, well, then you can't live with just a man because you're into women too. So you must need to have men and women in your life at the same time. No, maybe if you're polyamorous, but polyamory spans all sexual orientations. You could be heterosexual and polyamorous. Polyamory means many loves, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of wrong-headed thinking out there about it. And I used to have that too. Before I knew I'm not polyamorous myself. I'm oriented monogamously, meaning I want to be with my wife. I don't want to be with anyone else. And I've always been that way. And some people are oriented differently. They're polyamorous, meaning that it almost seems like they're born that way, that they fall in love and they want to be with that person. And they also want to have other relationships of some degree, whether it's full love with 5 people or full love with one person and more casual relationships with other people. Now, ideally, 2 polyamorous people come together and they form a relationship and they understand each other and they're not threatened usually as much with other relationships that they're in. There's an issue when you have a polyamorous person and a monogamously oriented person. Now, some monogamous oriented people are open to polyamory, or they might even be polyamorously oriented themselves and they just don't know it because they've never been asked that question. And society will tend to suppress that in people because they'll be shamed for it. But anyway, so there's this prejudice out there that if you're bisexual, you can never live with just one person. But that is stupid, right? We understand that because when you're heterosexual, I'm heterosexual and I am with my wife. By definition, I am saying I do not want to be with any other women. Now, my heterosexuality means I could be with other women, but I don't want to be. I want to be with one person because I'm a monogamous heterosexual person. If you're bisexual, you also are either monogamous or polyamorous. or something in between or whatever. So if you're bisexual and you're monogamous, which is what most bisexual people are, then you just want to be with one person. You find your one person independent of gender, and you just want to be with that person. And you're not lamenting like, oh, I can't believe that I can't be with the other gender. Because we all understand that when we commit to a relationship, we are sacrificing all other people if we're monogamous. We know we're sacrificing. We know that we're giving up those other options. You know, me and my wife married each other, we gave up the option of being with other people. She gave up the option of being with men. I gave up the option of being with women, other women. So when you're bisexual, same thing. You fall in love if you're monogamous and you say, I give up the option of being with other people. It sounds like Hazel is bisexual and poly. That needs to be said. So he said she's bisexual, and then they launch into this conversation about how she wants to meet other women. So I hope they say, and she's polyamorous. Now, it's possible that she doesn't know the terminology around polyamory. I don't know in the Philippines what kind of language they have over there, what kind of freedom they have to talk about that sort of thing. I don't know. In Seattle, we are a mecca, not only for LGBT, meaning, you know, LGB, bisexual, that's what the B is for those who don't know. Not only are we a mecca for queer people and LGBTQIA plus people, but also for polyamorous people. And I've treated all and everything in between. I, for a bit, was a little bit specialized in polyamorous couples. But I also want to say, and my cat is making some noise, that we had a huge figure in polyamory in Seattle recently die. Her name is Alina Gabosh. She was the grandmother of everyone in Seattle. She worked really hard. I won't go into the full history of polyamory organizations in Seattle and kink, BDSM organizations in Seattle. But she was a huge figure. The Erotic Arts Festival in Seattle, if you're from the region, she, I think, was in charge of that. But she did a lot to push forward what we call sex positivity in general, meaning that if it's not harming anyone and it's consensual, then we should be positive about it. We shouldn't stigmatize consenting adults doing consensual things that they love to do, including polyamory or kink or whatever they do. As long as it's consensual and within the law and it's not harming anyone, then why do we stigmatize it and why do we suppress it? And a lot of people have depression and maybe even suicidality because society will suppress it. But Alina Gabosh was a major figure in pushing sex positivity forward in the movement, not only in Seattle but around the world. And I had the honor of having her on the podcast years ago in the first year that I started. I started this podcast 2008. And I don't even know how I got in contact with her, but she ended up coming on the podcast and talking about polyamory. And I think it's still on YouTube. But in that episode in 2008, 12 years ago, the questions that I was asking show that I was ignorant of polyamory at the time. And I cringe as I listen to the questions that I asked. But I have grown a lot since then. I've read books, Ethical Slut, this kind of thing. And I've treated a lot of polyamorous people and gone to trainings. Anyway. My point is that we lost an important figure, and there should be a statue of her in Seattle if there should be a statue of anybody. But let's see if they say, okay, she's bisexual and polyamorous. Let's not conflate those two. And the reason why we don't want to conflate those two is because when people come out as bisexual, which is rarely discussed in our society, by the way, and there are a lot of bisexual people, when they come out, there's often this reaction of just like, so you can never live with just one person? And bisexual people are like, what? No. You're talking about poly. I'm bisexual. That doesn't mean I want to be with more than one person at a time. It just means that I could fall in love with any gender or with these sets of genders. Anyway, let's watch.
Virginia Beach is full of smoking hot women. Not long after that, she started talking about having a girlfriend. But there's so many questions that brings up. How is that going to work when she gets here? Is she really in this for me?
The central question, Tarik, is if you want another person in your life, if you want Hazel to fall in love with another person. That's what you should be thinking. Am I a polyamorous person? That's what you should be thinking. You shouldn't be thinking, I mean, I guess those other questions are fine, but the massive question you should be asking yourself is, do I want to be in a polyamorous relationship? And if not, do I want to be in a relationship with someone who's polyamorous and I'm going to have to suppress or ask them to suppress their polyamorous inclination throughout our entire relationship? We have to talk about that. How poly are you? What if I said no? What is this going to look like? Are you going to date lots of women? And if you're going to date other women, are you going to date other men? Like, there's so many questions that they should be talking about, which is great. And the joke that they say about, so there's another group of people, they'll call them swingers sometimes. And these people, and there's a lot of overlap, but for the swinger community, these people they often want to have very quick sexual interactions with other people, not full-on relationships in general. For polyamorous people, they actually want to be involved. They want to be friends or even married, essentially, to long-term relationships with people. And there's overlap, obviously. And the joke they make about these two groups is that, and polyamorous people will make this joke, is that swingers like to have sex and polyamorous people like to talk about having sex, meaning that polyamorous people talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk before anything happens. What do you want? How many people do you want in your life? What happens if I do this? Can I do this? How would you feel if I did this? Lots of communication. And that's what they're talking about. They're heading into a polyamorous relationship. So they've got to get a lot of stuff straight. What's going to happen here? What's going to happen in 5 years? What's the long-term picture? I hope that they have that conversation. And there are therapists like me who specialize in this that can help facilitate those conversations, even with everyone in the room, which I would do. I would have, for example, I would have Tarik and Hazel in my office, and I would have whoever else is involved in their situation also in the office.
Look at you, laughing like a little kid at the candy store. I'm just saying, I don't want you to be too happy thinking about a girl because you're going to forget about me.
Don't worry.
And we've had some trust and jealousy issues in the past. So it does make me nervous, but she wants to go full steam ahead on this thing. So I hope that we're really ready for it.
All right. So they're talking about it, which is good. There's a lot more necessary conversation that I would think would be necessary. Also, he's using the phrase or the term we. We are heading into this. So that makes me believe that maybe he actually is poly, whether he identifies with that word or not. So, and he seems to be saying, us as a couple are heading down this road. The other thing he said is, I'm worried that you're going to fall in love with someone else and you're going to leave me. That is a very common feeling, if not universal, to poly people. And that's where all the talking comes in and the bond comes in. A lot of times polyamorous people will talk about having a primary, meaning that they will identify, look, I'm in a relationship with 5 people, but you are my primary. You're my number one. You're the one I care about the most. You're my home base, if you will. You're the person that I want to be with forever. These other relationships, I love them too, and of varying degrees, but you're my number one. And if push comes to shove and you and I are having problems, I'm going to prioritize you over these other relationships. And people will talk like that. Sometimes people don't have primaries, but they often do. And so it sounds like they're trying to have that conversation, and it sounds like they just did in a very short way. That she said, don't worry. Now, I wish there'd be more conversation around that. But I'm seeing some signs that he is open and even maybe looking forward to it, which is fine. So let's see what happens here. My worry is that my worry is that he's not a polyamorous-oriented individual, and that he thinks of this as like, well, I kind of always wanted a threesome. Well, wouldn't that be fun? And then what might happen is that Hazel has a full-on romantic relationship, an emotional relationship with another woman, and he's like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. because they didn't talk a lot. They didn't talk enough. Now, I don't know. Maybe he is prepared for that. Maybe that won't happen. I guess we'll find out together. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Let me know what you think in the comments. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.